My name is Frank Sanchez, and for today's episode, I'm interviewing Miss Kathy Mauldin from C.C. Wynn High School, and she also taught at Eagle Pass High School. She worked for the PISD and was a former instructor at Sol Ross Rio Grande College for a while too. I'd like to start off with your origins with respect to the city. Because from what I kind of remember in high school, I think I had you for political science, or you never taught psychology, right? Did you?
No, I did.
Then it was psychology. I remember you would every now and then, when the UT would be going against the Sooners, you would always do this thing. I had never heard about college back in those days, so I wasn't too sure what was going on. But later on, I figured out, oh, I think she must have gone to that school, or was from the state. I don't know. Where did you go?
No, I did my master's work at the University of Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
So I am a Sooner.
There you go. Yeah, that was. Do they still follow? Do they still play against one another? Or
oh, yes.
They still are.
They still play every year.
Cool.
In October.
But how did you, like someone from so far away, end up in this community? How did that happen?
An ex-husband.
Oh.
We lived in central Oklahoma,
Okay.
and he worked in a jeans factory and was transferred down here, not to Dickey's,
Okay.
but to the one that was out on the, what is now Veterans Boulevard. There's a big warehouse behind like one of the radio stations or something.
Yes, Takata I think is there right now. Yeah.
It used to be a jeans factory. They made Sears Tough Skin jeans.
Look at that. I recall Dickey's. I remember Dickey's. You can still see because it's in the Fort Duncan area, and you can still
in
see
the
the
building.
signs and everything. But yeah.
Well, there were two of them. One was on Main Street where the IBC Bank is.
Okay.
There used to be a jeans factory there, and then the one out on the Loop.
Okay.
Both of them were owned by a company. It was actually called Bluebell, not the ice cream. Bluebell is out of North Carolina.
Okay.
And he made Wrangler jeans in Oklahoma, and then got transferred down here to do Sears Tough Skin jeans.
And then so once y'all came in, you came in as a teacher? You were already a teacher?
Yes.
Okay.
I had taught a year in Oklahoma, and then we transferred down here. And I could not find a job at the high school. There was no opening. So my first job here was at Benavides Elementary as a special ed teacher.
Whoa, look at that. I didn't know that. Benavides is the one that's on the hill, right?
On the hill.
On the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
I had 1st through 6th grade special ed kids for a year.
Look at that.
Yeah.
And then from there you went directly to the high school?
To the high school, yes. Mr. Bustamante, Dan Bustamante, hired me at the high school.
Wow. Wow. Can I ask what year that was?
We moved here in 76, so I taught at Benavides 76, 77, and then started at the old high school at 77.
Now, because I know if students listen to this, and I know myself, what building was that one in, the high school in those days? Because I know it's been many different areas throughout the years.
Yes, it was just the original, what you'd call A, B, and D wing.
Oh, okay, so it was already here.
Yes.
Okay.
But it did not have the back halls. It only had the first two halls where you see A, B, and D wing.
Yes.
Well, not D wing, but A and B. It only had the first two halls.
Oh.
The third hall was added the second year I was there. I moved to the high school in the fall of 77.
Yeah.
The other one was added a year later. Well, a year and a half.
Okay.
So then I was moved to the back of A wing. The last hall in A wing, and I was in that hall from like 79 until we moved to C.C. Wynn in 98. So I was there in that room for almost 20 years at the back of A wing.
Look at that. Jeez. Okay, so then you never, because I heard once upon a time that the high school there was a high school in the Webster, and then there was the one in junior high. Was that a thing, or you're?
Yes.
Okay, so
the high school, was built, I want to say, have you ever heard? I believe it was like 73, 74.
Oh,
so it was relatively new when I moved into it.
And then they added on to it not too long after.
Yeah, they greatly underestimated.
Yes.
Yeah, by 78, 79, they had already had to add another 2 halls. And then, of course, they were using those outside buildings, and then they brought in more outside buildings.
Mm-hmm.
before they added the new section.
Look at that. We still kind of face that today. Very crowded rooms, kind of. Awesome. Let's see, what else I have here. So, what made you stay in Eagle Pass? Having been from, like, I mean, or if you had family in Oklahoma?
Well, when I was young, my family moved around a lot.
Okay.
I went to 7 elementary schools.
Wow.
And I am currently living in my 18th home. I hated moving.
Yeah.
And when we were in Oklahoma, while I had taught a year, I had gone to school for 5 years, mostly because I married a gentleman who came out of the Marines, came out of Vietnam and had the GI Bill.
Yeah.
So he was still in school, so I stayed in and got my first master's. Then I went and looked for a job, and I finally got a job. But it didn't really work out. What they wanted was a coach. In Oklahoma in those days, coaches were the ones who taught history.
Yeah.
So I went back to school. So I'd gone to school for 5 years straight, taught a year, and then went to school at the University of Oklahoma for 2 years, working on my second master's. And I knew that after we moved here, I knew that we got divorced after we moved here.
Okay.
And I was concerned that if I moved back to Oklahoma, I'd run into the same problem. I mean, I interviewed at probably 24 schools in Oklahoma, and they were always asking me, well, can you coach? Can you teach something else?
Yeah.
And I was worried, and a friend here actually arranged for me to get an interview for a history job at the high school.
Okay.
And so I had a guaranteed job. And then when I became a single parent, I actually decided, I made a conscious decision that Eagle Pass, being smaller at that time, this was late 70s, it was smaller, my son would be safe. I felt he would be safe. I had a job, I had friends, and so I decided to stay. I don't know that I knew I was going to stay for 40 years. That evolved over time.
Yeah.
But a lot of it had to do with the fact that I did have a job, I did have friends to help me, and as I said earlier, I absolutely hated moving.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and it worked out really well because I had a great job, and my son Alex did really well in school, went on to college at UTSA, and so my decision to stay here worked out really well. But I can tell you that from my family's point of view, it was a very strange decision.
Yeah.
They wanted me to move back to Oklahoma, be close to family, and even now my closest family is in Oklahoma and Arkansas, and Japan. So
Nah. That's literally the other side of the world.
Other side of the world. So it was, yeah, it was a decision at that time. I mean, my mother was still alive, but I had to make a decision on where I thought I could actually work, and I knew it was just going to be hard to find a job in Oklahoma. And I had a job offered to me here,
Yeah.
and that worked out real well. 40
Yes, it
years
has.
later.
And thank you for staying on behalf of the rest of Eagle Pass and myself. You know, I can't say how happy I was that I had you as a teacher. So
Thank you.
um,
I can't
Sorry.
even tell you, I was actually, after you had asked me about this, I got to thinking about, I wish I had actually kept track of how many students I've had over the years, because I can't even tell you. There, in the old days, I don't know if you knew this, we actually had a period, 1 year, where we had 9 periods.
oh yeah. I think I came in.
Yeah.
And it was just like 1 year like that.
Yeah.
And then the following year, it's the way it is right now, which is nice and calm.
Much calmer, yeah.
Yes, that was like, oh my lord,
yeah,
it was
just
too fast. Too
So
many.
there would be years where I had 160, 170. One year I had 180 kids. And then there was 15 years where I taught economics, which meant I had 2 sets of kids a year.
Yeah, I took economics with you too.
Okay.
Yes.
So I easily could have 300 kids a year. That was for 15 years. So if you're looking at a 40-year period here in Eagle Pass, I mean, we're talking 10,000, whatever. I mean,
Lives.
a lot of kids.
Yeah, lives that you managed to cross.
To see. So.
That's
But like I
awesome.
said, I wish, when you start out, you don't think about that kind of thing. But I wish I'd kept track of how many kids
Yeah.
I had every year. So.
Yeah, I wonder too. I you know, me that I'm currently teaching right now, I'm not that far off. I could probably kind of calculate what I've had and see how many more I impact. That is a good number to keep track of. I hadn't thought about that. When I was at CC Wynn still, you were a UIL coach and you were one of the sponsors for NHS. So you've always kind of, well, I mean, in those times you were always close to a lot of students that were high caliber students, and they work hard and they more likely going to go to college. Is there anyone that you remember from those days, or even from the beginning days, that just really stood out to you, or that you've kind of seen the progression in life and kind of been like, wow, this kid's, you know, this guy's gone here and done this and has done something really,
Oh, well.
or just as a
there's-
student on its own?
There's a lot of students, as you said. I did teach a number of years where it was just regular U.S. history classes, because I started out in world geography and world history, so I taught regular classes for a number of years. Economics was all just regular classes. The last 10 years or so, yes, 10, 12 years, I was only teaching college bound. But I have taught a lot of kids who've gone on to do different things. One of the more interesting ones that would appeal to you, being in media tech, I had a young man, we were at CC Wynn, had a young man who wasn't into school, which was okay, because I truly am one of those who believes that a young person needs to figure out what they want to do in life, and college is not always the path to follow. And he didn't know what he wanted to do, but he wanted to do something in art. So I was one of the ones who helped him to get into the Art Institute in Houston. And his family did not want him to do it because they thought it would be a waste of time. And he actually did not even think that, he didn't even know if he could make a living. He was really conflicted about whether he should go to college or whatever. But we helped him to get into the Art Institute, and today he works in films. He does animation.
Hey.
I don't know if he's still doing it out of Texas or if he's gone, but I know he's in animation. He does.
Cool.
And he contacted me after he had been studying for a while at the Art Institute, and he says, "Ma'am, I'm doing computer animation." And he said, "It never even occurred to me, you know, when I was in high school, that I would actually do that." I have another student, Esteban. He's now doing computer programming.
Yes.
Yes. And
Saldivar, I believe.
Saldivar.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I know him.
Of course, I've had a number of students. Alia Moses was my student, the federal judge in Del Rio. She's my student. And in fact, she will actually tell you it's one of my most prideful moments.
Yes.
Her sister, of course, was Lilia Moses, who taught for 35 years math. And she told Lilia that I was one of the teachers that she truly felt helped prepared her to go to college and study law. And that made me feel really good that because that was not always necessarily my goal, to teach you to go to college, but it was to teach you that learning things and discovering things and thinking about things was something that could help you, you know, later on. And so it made me feel really good that she said that. But there's, well, I can't even tell you how many people in this school district, when I knew that I was going to retire, I had actually thought about asking, how many people in the room in the auditorium had me in class.
Did you say, no, I think Mr. Fuentes was a student, right? But you weren't his teacher at the time, or?
I don't think so.
But you were a teacher here. When I found that out, I was like, wow.
Well, not so much anymore. But at one time, there was like half the people at CC Wynn I had taught at some point in time. But if you had asked, how many had me in class, or how many had had a son or daughter that had me in class, because several of the lawyers here in town I had in class, the bank people, Hector Serna, Ramsey, the mayor, the judge, the county judge, David Saucedo, was my student council officer.
That sounds about right.
People who've been on the school board. Mr. Torralba, that just recently gave up being on the school board, was my son's friend, but he was also one of my students. I mean, there's so many people in town that have gone on to professional careers or just gone on to do things here in our community and elsewhere. I've had people become doctors and nurses and engineers. There's one currently working now with Dell in Austin. One of my UIL students, he was a former UIL student, now working with Dell. Which, by the way, it's one of the things I like to recommend to teachers. A lot of people always said, well, how'd you be a single parent and work with all of these kids? And I said, well, yeah, it was hard because I did have to give up time with my son, but I was lucky. I was very lucky. He was very independent, and once he got into junior high and band, it was okay. He was a band person, so I had more time. But I actually, as you said, I did UIL. I did junior historians. I don't know if you knew that. We had a junior historians. I did that for 2 years. I was student council sponsor for 19 years before I became the NHS advisor. And I always tell people, if you get an opportunity as a teacher to work with students outside the classroom, you get to see them in a different way, and they get to see you in a different way. And I just enjoyed it so much. It made my teaching more fun, being at school more fun, to be involved in something outside of my classroom. And nowadays it's getting real hard. I mean, I don't know how it is at EPHS, but I know at CC Wynn sometimes they can struggle to find people who are willing to sponsor stuff.
Because
people are busy and it's hard, but it can be some of the best ways to engage with students and learn about them.
Yeah, I agree. I created a club a while back, the Colloquium.
Yes, I remember.
And some of the fondest memories I ever had from when I was at Wynn was when I was in that club, and you're right, you do see them in a different light. I had so many kids show up, and like Raymond Chaca and Ana Maldonado showed up every now and then, and Ariana Gutierrez, and it was a really neat way of refreshing my batteries and recharging, and it was.
Well, you get a little bit of that now with your film.
Yes,
thing
so I kind of do it during the day now, and which is kind of nice because I got 2 kids, so it's a lot harder to stay after class. When I had the Colloquium, it was just my wife and I.
Yeah.
And now I go home and it's the after party with the kids.
It's
so
real hard, yes.
But I do agree. I love those days. Awesome. And Saldivar, I believe, is Esteban. He's working with gaming. He's creating games in Austin, and he's, from what I hear, for all intents and purposes, he is crushing it. Pretty much, he's doing a wonderful job.
He got to go off to that symposium or forum or someplace and represent his company and everything. That was just so great.
Yeah, that's someone I would probably like to see if I can get in contact with and talk to, so I can share his story, because not many people share that story, what he's doing.
You know, one of the reasons why it'd be so great for you to share that story, I think we have too many kids today going through school who don't realize there are opportunities out there that you don't think of because you do live in Eagle Pass and you don't see it. But there are opportunities out there, things that you would love to be involved in, and you don't think about it.
I can make money making games. Yep, there's a lot of money in making games. It's a thing. I have a couple of questions here, but you mentioned that it was a smaller town. A smaller town, I guess, implying possibly like a place where you can raise kids and not have to be worried about crime scene so much and other things. But not to say that that's kind of what's happened now that as it's gotten bigger. But from back in those days to now, what have you seen kind of change other than more people in Eagle Pass? I know we used to have a bookstore back in the day, Mauldin Books. I know there those outdoor movie theaters, but I don't know. Having lived here so long, what have you seen kind of change in the town or in the student body?
Well, that's two different questions.
Oh yes.
In the town, it's not just that there's so many people. I'm sure that you've heard this from your family members. Used to, if you went out to eat or if you went to Walmart or H-E-B, you would know most of the people that you saw. Now, I don't know a lot of these people, and I hear my friends say the same thing. They go in to eat somewhere at Chili's or San Miguel's or Fuddruckers, and they don't know a lot of the people that are there. So that changes the vibe.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem as friendly as it used to be, where everybody literally knew your name or knew sort of who you were or whatever. So I think that's something that's a little bit lost.
Yeah.
As the city has grown, like any town that's growing, it's having trouble keeping up, whether it be street repair or providing services and such. It's just harder, and that's a shame. I also, there's a big change that I really don't know. You might know since you're in school, but I never did ask the kids this question, and I've always been curious. What do the young kids do for fun? When I was first here, even into the 90s, kids went across. And
yes. Back it was different.
Yeah, at different times, people went across, and it makes me wonder what young people are actually doing. That's different. I couldn't honestly tell you whether there's been an increase in alcohol or drug use among young people, because I know that they drank before.
Yeah, it's not new. We didn't invent that, or the kids aren't inventing that.
No. But I think because of something that you said earlier, if you need something fixed, who do you go and ask? With the growth of the city and the way it's spread out, particularly for those who live outside the city limit in the county or on the edges, you don't know.
Yeah.
Whereas before you would probably know who you could call or who you could get in touch with, and I think that's changed. As far as kids to me have, on one level, haven't changed at all. I stayed in Eagle Pass, people from other places, because I had been offered opportunities to go someplace else to work, and I would always tell them, but our kids are nice.
This is true.
Overall, for the most part, I think we have nice kids, and I hear or you see horrible stories. I have friends who actually have retired but are substituting in San Antonio. They moved to San Antonio and they're substituting, and they tell horrible stories. And I think for the most part, our kids are nice. I think I've been very lucky to have worked with so many just really nice kids. And I noticed, to give you an example of how nice they are, the last year that I was teaching, before I had my surgery, I was having a hard time getting around. In fact, they gave me kind of like a grocery cart type thing at school,
Yes,
so
you
that I
make
could walk around.
copies.
Yes, so I
Yeah.
could walk around easier. And if I used my cane, I was limping really bad. There were people all over that school, adults, but students, people I didn't even know, who would offer to help me with something, who would, carry stuff for me, or let me pick that up, or let me move that for you. People I didn't even know.
Right.
And the same thing in the community. I would go into Walmart or into HEB and, ma'am, come over here, ma'am, let me help you, ma'am. Part of that could just be, I know a lot of people, or they know who I am, or whatever, but people are genuinely, I think, for the most part, nice. And that could be a little disturbing as the town grows and you have a lot of people that you don't know.
Right.
Maybe they're not all
Yeah.
quite as nice. But I digressed. I was going to say something about how kids had changed. The one thing that I did notice from when I first started teaching till my end of my teaching career is there were too many students who didn't care. Not so much the students I had. Yes,
Right.
the last 10 years I was only doing dual credit or AP, and all of those kids had plans to go to college. So they genuinely either wanted to do well or do well enough to be sure that they could go to college. But I saw too many kids in school around our campus, around here in the district, of kids who did not care. And in the old days, very old days, if you told a student that he was in trouble and you were going to send him to the office, that bothered him. Now there are kids there that they don't care what you say to them. They don't care. They don't feel threatened by authority. They come to school for a variety of reasons, but it's not to get an education. And that to me had changed. It seemed to be there were too many kids like that.
And indifference is a very scary thing because you can't even make them feel like anything because they're very.
No, I
doesn't
don't
matter.
care.
That's scarier to me than anger. Because at least they feel something. They might be angry that you're telling them the truth, or something that might hurt them a little bit, that will hopefully incite them to prove us all wrong and do something well. And I don't know,
Yes.
But if it's just complete indifference,
And too
that's
many
scary.
that when you ask them, they're in their senior year, and you ask them, what are you planning to do? And they shrug, I don't know. That to me changed. I just saw more kids that didn't seem to care than I did when I was first teaching.
Yeah.
So
Things have changed. Yeah. I know when I was in school and I got in trouble. This was back when corporal punishment was okay. Yeah, and I remember they asked me, you got two options. I won't say who, what principal get it, because it happened twice. Kind of goes, but I learned my lessons. And they would tell me, you got two options. You could either get a licking, as they would say back in those days, or we would call your parents. And my parents never, they were always good to me. They never did anything bad. But for some reason, it just felt like, I don't want you to call my parents. I feel that would be very bad. So, because I cared. I wasn't indifferent. I cared about what they would think about me. And I would get those lickings, and they would hurt a lot. And anytime I wanted to misbehave, or I remembered really clearly. It took
how
twice.
that made you feel?
One of them I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. The second one, I guess I could kind of say, that was kind of deserved that. But yeah, I definitely thought twice about doing bad stuff or things that I shouldn't be doing.
I know, and now there are kids that they don't think about it at all.
It's getting harder and harder to make them feel something, make them feel that, we love you and we want you to learn and we want you to do good. Please do good for your sake.
For your sake,
not for me.
But I don't think they know what they want,
No.
or they don't see a bright future.
I think that they're getting off track here, but I do think this is an important conversation. I think that they're getting distracted. I think people in general are so distracted with social media, with the news, quote unquote news, with all this. There's just too many distractions, all these notifications ringing all the time, and people are living in this virtual reality more so than in reality in real life things. And we're just so trained, like was it Pavlov's dog or whatever, to hear that bell and to continue looking for the feed and Instagram or Facebook or whatever platform you use. And yet the time keeps going, time is still ticking, and if you're not careful, you will waste your life away searching for nothing that's on those feeds. Nothing on those feeds will help you. I am sorry, and you need to take care of yourself. And I say this because it's been so many years since I graduated from high school, and it just goes by fast, really fast. Even if you feel you got a grip on things, time keeps on slipping
by. Well, along those lines, the other thing that really changed was, and it has to do again with social media and such, students want to be entertained.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
And I struggled a little bit with that, but I was okay because you didn't have me in history, but I like to teach history by telling them stories.
Yeah.
And so I could keep their attention, but I know so many teachers struggle. A math teacher, I always admired people who taught math because I thought, how do you keep their attention? I at least can tell a story and get them to laugh. How do you keep their attention teaching math? And these kids want to be entertained, and they just won't
short
stay.
Attention spans. They want to see. Oh yeah. Having taught math, I remember those days, and you're telling them something very abstract that they feel is not quite important to them, but yeah, you're right. They do want to get entertained, and teachers, the ones that try to go above and beyond, realize that, I feel, and try to do something about it. It's unfortunate because back in the day, we didn't, as students, I don't remember getting entertained. I remember just going and you better learn this, and we learned it. If you wanted to pass and graduate, that was it. And
well, actually, though, the apparently from the time I was young, I always wanted to be a teacher. At least according to my mom, I always said from the time I was old enough to talk, I always said. But I did not decide what I wanted to teach until I was in 10th grade and had a world history teacher who told stories.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided what I wanted to do. And I guess we just need more people turning these kids on to something.
Yeah.
So that they want to move forward, because it's real hard to get their attention and keep it and motivate them unless they're already self-motivated.
Yeah, a little bit. Some of them do come with some. Some of them are very curious. It's an interesting time.
Well, I meant to tell you another story. You had asked me about people that I remembered, but there's a story I remember from an ordinary kid, economics class, was going to go to college, senior, going to drop out of school. I had him in class, and he was sitting at the back, and I didn't really know his story, but his girlfriend was also in the class. And I could tell she was upset, and I asked her, and she said, he's going to quit school. And I said, well, is there a specific reason? And she says, well, he just doesn't get it. He's struggling in your class, he's struggling, and he just figures he's wasting his time. So I sat him down, and I said, I'll make you a deal. If you'll come, stay in school and come to my class and sit up here in front. You have to sit right up here in front. I will help you get through this class. And I will make sure that you pass this class. You can count on it. But you have to come, and you have to try and do stuff, and if you can't do it, then ask me and I'll show you how to do it, and I will get you through this class. And he did. He believed me, and he did, and he stayed in school and he graduated. And I actually considered that to be one of my biggest success stories, because I helped him to stay in school and to show him that he could actually learn something and he could actually pass the class. It wasn't a disaster. It wasn't something that he couldn't do. He could actually do it if somebody showed him how to do it.
Yeah.
And it was, for a while you could tell it was killing him, because he was the kind of person who would most definitely want to sit at the back of the class, not be right there in front of the teacher, but he had to spend the semester right in front of me.
He committed, just like you did.
He
right
finished,
back then.
but he finished school and he graduated, and so that was actually a good thing for me.
Yeah, I can't imagine. You can, and those things hold you through for a couple of months and years, and then and then it gets really rough, and then something else really nice happens, or you realize or find something.
This wasn't a rough one, but I had a sociology class where I had this gang member, and he came in all attitude and whatever, and he calmed down. He realized, okay, this class is kind of interesting, this is kind of fun, so he was doing his stuff. And then, I don't know, a few weeks into the semester, 2 of his buddies were put in my class.
Uh-oh, this can't be good.
Yes, he gave it up. He had a B in my class, and he just gave it up. And I spoke to him, and he said, I can't. And the 3 of them would sit in the back. I don't know if you recall, but I did not use seating charts. I never used a seating chart in my class unless the class really, really bothered me. So you could sit where you wanted. Well, so they went and sat in the back, and they'd sit back there with their attitude, and they're leaning back in the whatever. And I guess they bothered me one day in class or something, and I said something to them, and they just, the leader of them, kind of like glared at me. And when class was over, he came up to me as he was leaving, and he said, if you don't bother us, we won't bother you. Okay.
What's that supposed to mean?
Okay. And he walked out. And basically what ended up happening is all 3 of them failed the class.
Okay.
But they never bothered me in class again. They never disrupted the class.
Yeah.
They never bothered in class. They all 3 failed, which was actually crushing for me, because that one boy was perfectly.
If they hadn't shown up,
he would have, like I said, he was doing B work in the class. Maybe could have done A work, but he gave it all up. They all 3 failed the class, but they didn't bother my class.
They stuck to the agreement.
They stuck to the agreement. Said, you don't bother me, and I thought, okay, this is an elective. If they don't care if they don't get their half credit elective, then if it keeps peace in my class, then that's the kind of decision you make. I wouldn't have done that with a kid, like in economics that needed the class to graduate, but it was a half credit elective. But yeah, he said, if you don't bother us, we won't bother you. Okay.
Stuck to his guns. So, and pick one, I guess. What advice would you give a new teacher that you wish someone had given you, or what advice would you give to current teachers, especially early ones, about retirement now that you've reached it?
To an early teacher.
So, either one of those.
I think for a new teacher, for most new teachers, it's a struggle. College education classes, doing that period of time where you go and observe, really truly does not prepare you to be in the deep end of the pool. And I know my first year was not good.
Same.
And I had some problems even my first year at the high school, but a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had to rotate. I didn't have a classroom in the beginning. I had to rove. And I was young and had long blonde hair and wore short skirts and was totally not, it set me up to have problems with boy students that I should not have had. But I'd like them to understand that if they truly like and want to be a teacher and can find the joy in teaching, one of my philosophies was not have a class period go by without making the class laugh. Kids were always laughing in my class, and I didn't even care if they laughed at me, but I wanted them to feel like they were comfortable enough that it was okay to laugh, not at each other, make fun of, but make the class fun. Find something fun in your teaching, because it will get better as you learn your subject matter, as you get more at ease with dealing with students. Because as I said since I taught a year in Oklahoma, in my 41 years of teaching, I had classes with students who behaved horribly. I got in one class so angry that I actually did want to hit a kid. I really wanted to smack a kid. I got so angry. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have bad classes. And one of the reasons why I like teaching economics, you only had them for a semester, and then you get to change out if you turn out not to have good classes. But find the joy in it so that you make it not fun all the time for the kids. I would tell them, we have to get through this, and I'm going to try and make it as interesting as I can, but we have to get through this, and you have to do this amount of work, and it's not going to be fun for you all the time, but you have to find the joy in it. You have to find the fun in it. Otherwise, they don't. And you also have to show that you like teaching. I find it sad that we have teachers who don't they complain all the time. They don't like their classes. I've even known some teachers who I honestly think didn't like kids. And I'm thinking, because sometimes I think people fall into teaching because that's just where they end up.
Yeah.
They intended to do something else, but they ended up doing it. If you want to make it a career, and if you want to make it so that you are willing to get up 5 days a week, it's not 36 weeks anymore, it's longer than 36 weeks, but 10 months a year working at school, then find the joy in it. Make it fun. And yes, testing, STAR, or anything else that they come up with took a lot of that fun out. But you can still find things that make it fun or make it enjoyable. Just do something for fun. Take a day and do something for fun, because it is too long of a period of time. It is 41 years. And you think, I'll never make it to retirement. I'll never make it till my 60s or whatever, if I get to 30 or whatever. I continued teaching. I would have gone on teaching. It just became physically too hard for me to continue teaching. But I would have continued because I enjoyed being around the kids. I enjoyed seeing them learn something. I enjoyed listening to them ask questions or answer strange answers. I enjoyed. And so for a young teacher, if you really want this, then you need to find something that will make it enjoyable for you and your students, so that each day is not unbearable. Each day becomes a struggle to get up in the morning and go to work. So.
I love it. Very, very true. And especially for the first year teachers, the fiery baptism is real.
The fiery baptism is real, and for almost everybody I know, and certainly for me, the first year was not.
No.
And I can understand that.
Yeah. Concludes, the podcast for now, and thank you so much for doing this.
You're most welcome.